to our Periscope friends. Week 3, Meditation and Miracles. We talked last week about recognizing that the other person is you. So I was curious if there were situations where you felt that that was a helpful thing for you to remember, or looking back on the week, whether there were opportunities to use it where maybe it wouldn't have occurred to you in the past. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Not so
I
much.
mean, it's not what's stuck with me.
Okay.
Last time.
What stuck with you
It was
from our
like
last one?
the first lesson of A Course in Miracles.
So what lesson are you on now?
Well, number 8.
So you've
Since
been
I
doing
started-
it every day
yes.
since last Friday. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And the first lesson, I mean, I was totally euphoric after like the whole Friday.
Euphoric.
Day. Yes, totally.
What was so
Because my mind has been raised and built, and like, you know, I really worked hard to always give meaning to everything. So
Right.
being free of like doesn't mean anything was just like it's like I was
Really?
waiting for it since a very long time, I guess.
amazing?
So I really am like into it. It's like it's for me, and like I don't have the question I usually have. You know, it's like you know, I need someone to help me with it or guide me. I mean, I have you to guide me, obviously, but it's like, you know, am I, you know, do I know enough? Am I gonna get everything out of it? It doesn't matter. It's just like going.
So beautiful.
So I love it.
Sometimes, well, you know, like we talked about last week, like this is only going to work if you work it. So it's wonderful to come here and talk about the philosophy of this, but doing the practice is really where it's at. So I am thrilled that you've done that for yourself. Some people sometimes report in the initial stages some fear coming up around like nothing meaning anything, but it sounds like you had the opposite reaction where this was a huge relief for you.
Because in a way, it's like this is something I've known, and I've been working so hard to give meaning to everything, and that doesn't work. So
Right.
it's kind of a relief that it goes by and came to
Awesome.
balance.
So beautiful.
So,
Yay! Congratulations. Liberation.
I'm like really
That's the idea.
excited.
And Amy, you've been doing May Cause Miracles, right?
Yes.
And what has that been like for you?
It's been really transformative. I think one of the steps that I was missing before, because I've been in personal development for like a long time, but I think what I was doing was, my background is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, so it's, I'll you know, look for the evidence and be aware of it, and then switch it to something that's like more positive or that, you know, serves me, which is great, but I had forgotten the forgiveness aspect of it. And that's what's been really healing for me over the last couple of weeks, is just forgiving myself for those thoughts and then moving forward in love instead.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we are going to start out with our meditation like we always do. So let's tune in. So sit up straight, rub your palms together, hands together at your sternum. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath in. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Adgure Name, Jugadgure Name, Sadgure Name, Siddhi Gurudeve Name. Adgure Name, Jugadgure Name, Sadgure Name, Siddhi Gurudeve Name. Adgure Name, Jugadgure Name, Sadgure Name, Siddhi Gurudeve Name. One more deep breath in and exhale. Open our eyes. So one of the themes that I wanted us to kind of focus on today is one of loving yourself. And before we do this meditation, the meditation that we're going to focus on is called the meditation to conquer self-animosity. So oftentimes, right, we're really hard on ourselves. So we can conquer our self-animosity from a really like, I'm going to conquer it and like beat my self-animosity out of myself, which, right, it doesn't come from a really loving place. That's a really harsh place. And I think a lot of us, that's what we tend to do first off, is to be hard on ourselves when we're trying to extinguish whatever behavior we don't like. So I was hoping that this passage would help us do this conquering of self-animosity from a really gentle and loving place. And this is a passage from Journey to the Heart by Melody Beattie, which is a really great book, and I can give you the link later if you like it. And that book has passages for every day and different observations she's made about life. So this one says, love yourself. No matter what, love yourself. Love yourself even when it feels like the world around you is irked with you, even if it feels like what you've counted on most have gone away, even if you wonder if God has abandoned you. When it feels like the journey has stopped, the magic is gone, and you've been left sitting on the curb, love yourself. When you're confused and angry about how things are or how they're going to be or how they've gone, love yourself. No matter what happens or where you are, love yourself. No matter if you aren't certain where you're going or if there's any place left to go, love yourself. This situation will change. This time will pass and the magic will return. So will joy and faith. You will feel connected again to yourself, God, the universe, and life. But the first thing to do is love yourself, and all the good you want will follow. So let's have that be our mantra for today. So we are going to do, like I said, the meditation to conquer self-animosity. And I just want to read you some of the comments about this meditation, what Yogi Bhajan had to say about it. There are no enemies. There are challenges to our creativity. And the greatest enemy is the self. Self-defeating activity and self-animosity occur where we do not accept ourselves. We instinctively reject self-confirmed continuity. We will oppose our own success and accomplishment just to break with steadiness. That break is the assertion of ego, right? When we sabotage ourselves, an attempt at marking and possessing something in time and space. The self-animosity distracts us from the real gift of human life, the capacity to confront and experience the self in relationship to the unknown infinity of ourself. So this meditation conquers the state of self-animosity and gives you the ability for constant consciousness and support of the core self. So here we're going to try to stop our self-defeating nature, which interferes with our light, right? That's what he's saying, is that we do these things that interrupt us from our natural, steady state to kind of have the ego assert itself. And so this is going to let that go away. And what I'm going to just show you how to do the position. So you're going to sit like you are. Your neck is going to be in a slightly downturned. And you're going to bring your fingers together like this and your thumbs together. So your thumbs and your fingers are together, and you're going to hold them at chest level. And then the breath is going to be very specific. You're going to inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, inhale through the mouth, and exhale through the nose. So that is going to be the cycle of breath, and I'll keep reminding you. And your gaze will be at the tip of your nose. Now, in Kundalini, when we say at the tip of the nose, it's helpful to kind of close your eyes and imagine that your eyes are kind of crossed at the tip of your nose as your focal point. So I'm going to start the music, and then I'll cue you for the breath, and just try to hang in there, okay? So breathing in through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, Inhaling through the mouth. Exhaling through the nose. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling completely through the mouth. Inhaling deeply and smoothly through the mouth. And exhaling through the nose. You know, this is very challenging. Just try to hang in there. We have about 2 more minutes. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth. Inhaling through the mouth. And exhaling through the nose. About 30 more seconds, inhaling deep through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth. Inhaling through the mouth. And exhaling through the nose. And you can build up to 11 minutes in this meditation if you like. It's done for a minimum of 3 minutes. Never exceed 22 minutes. Now inhale deeply and stretch your arms up over your head. And as you hold your arms stretched up, take 3 deep, big breaths. And when you're done, just relax into easy pose, keeping eyes closed. And we'll move into just a deep, relaxing meditation. Allowing all the work that you've just done to integrate.
Way down in New York town, thinking about the way she left me. There's a hole in my pocket that's about her size, but I think everything is gonna be alright. Yes, I hope everything is gonna be alright. A smiling face is trading at hate. The gifts I found at the bar, but I wish my car could drive to her tonight. That I'd know everything is gonna be alright. Yes, that I'd know it'll be alright. The rain in New Orleans forgot to end, but the mouths of the people are dry, and we watch and wait and do nothing but sigh and hope everything is gonna turn out right. But I don't know if it'll be alright. But I look at you, warm in your dream, while your mobile dances above. And I think to myself, it's a beautiful night, and I know everything's gonna be alright. Yes, now I know it'll be alright.
Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Come back to the room. Yes, everything is going to be all right. And that's when we get into our miracle mindset, right? We need to know that whatever is occurring outside of us, it seems like it's not going to be all right, that it is. And I thought one of the concepts that would be really useful for us to talk about today is one we ended with last week when we talked about miracles requiring a purification of the mind. So in the book, just for people who are following along at home, let me find exactly which one it is. It's number 7 in the Principles of Miracles. Miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. And I wanted to talk about more about what do we mean by purification. What does that look like? And it doesn't mean going to the mikvah, like I was saying last week, which is a Jewish purification ritual, or every religion in the world or tradition seems to have its own purification rituals. And I was thinking a lot about this principle this week because it's a really powerful one, that our minds, our ego minds, are so trained to live in fear that we truly must purify the mind to think differently. And what does that look like, and what does that entail, and how eager we are to purify our bodies, right? We'll go on the juice cleanse, we'll go to the sauna, we'll do the sweat lodge, we will take a million supplements and vitamins. Like, that's so easy for us to get our head around. Oh yeah, I need to purify my body, I need to do a cleanse. But what about that mental cleanse, right? We're so attached to our thoughts. And when we can really clear the decks and clean our thought system up, we can have a whole different way of seeing the world. And Natasha Frederick was sharing before that she started doing some of the workbook lessons here, and really had an experience of euphoria this week in having a new way of looking at things. So that's what we're talking about. That's the process of purifying the mind, is starting to stop looking at our attachments as the truth and starting to think differently about them. And we get so invested in the fear thoughts. So how do we go about purifying our mind? Step number one, of course, is to start doing the workbook lessons and really doing one day at a time, doing the lessons and starting to challenge how we see things. So last week we started with lesson 1, and I will just repeat that briefly so people who might have missed it can get an understanding of what we're talking about. So lesson 1, the lesson is, nothing I see in this room means anything. And then you're supposed to look at each item in the room and say, this block does not mean anything. This book does not mean anything. This bench does not mean anything. This chair does not mean anything. And really looking around the room and applying it to every single thing that you see. And throughout the first week, we have a progression. So in lesson 2, we say, I've given everything I see in this room all the meaning it has for me. So step 1 in this purification is actually to take responsibility that your thought has projected, what your thought system in your mind has projected the meaning onto everything that you see. So we can do this in our everyday lives too, thinking about a situation that might be upsetting us and saying, why am I upset? Because of the meaning I'm attributing to whatever the situation is. So for me, like this week, I got in a little bit of a fender bender, and everyone was okay. But I got out of the car. The woman stopped really suddenly in front of me, and I was not being attentive, and I just couldn't hit the brakes fast enough. We both got out of our cars, and I looked at her car, and I was like, whew, nothing happened. Everything is fine. Like, oh, thank God. And then she looked at this tiny little scratch on her bumper, and she was furious, furious, furious. It was the tiniest little scratch. But she had worked very hard for the past 2 years to keep her car entirely scratch-free. And she was furious at me. She was so, so upset because now her car was no longer perfect. So to me, that was like a perfect illustration of like the role of attribution, where my attribution was like, oh, everything's great because I must be used to seeing I have a 7-year-old car. There are lots of scratches on that car, right? So a tiny, like I didn't even notice that tiny scratch, which infuriated her. And it just shows you the power of attribution. The same exact scratch. I was elated and she was furious. So, wow. Same thing, 2 different sets of eyes, 2 different interpretations. And so we can do that. That's what we need to start doing within our own mind. And so the first trigger is, if you notice you're feeling in a way that doesn't feel good, you need to start to look at, what thought am I having? So first we recognize and observe, like we talked about 2 weeks ago. We become a non-judgmental witness of our thoughts. And we start to analyze them. We start to examine them, not to be like, when I say analyze, I don't mean like psychoanalyze. I mean, we just start to look at the content of our thoughts and start to recognize that they don't necessitate truth, right? That it's our interpretation of reality. It's the projection of our own mind. So that's a big one. And these workbook lessons help you to first recognize and then purify your thought system by choosing differently. And as you choose differently, like we talked about in that opening passage, from a loving, loving place doing this. Because if we do it from a place of frustration with ourselves and self-judgment and criticism, that's feeding into the ego, into that whole fear-based thought system. So when we do this in community and we do it with gentleness and kindness towards ourselves, we can really make so many more gains and have so much more progress, and it lasts. And we want to stick with it versus just wanting to give up because it's making us feel worse than we already felt before. But what is common sometimes early on, there's a sense of almost derealization, like, well, if nothing's real, like, why am I here? What are we doing? Like, why should I go to work? Why should I do anything? And so, you know, the idea is that we still are on this reality, but we need to kind of check into our larger reality. Does that make sense? Any questions coming up or thoughts as we discuss this concept? Okay. So I was thinking we would continue on with what are miracles, because this leads us to further understand what we mean by purification, right? That miracle is the change in perception from a fear-based perception to one based on love. And they require purification because we have to be able to save our mind, to change our mind, to shift our perception. So miracles are healing because they supply a lack. They're performed by those who temporarily have more for those who temporarily have less. So when you shift your perception, you're doing it not only for yourself, but for all those who you come in contact with. And this is something that might be kind of challenging to comprehend right now, because the idea is that we are part of some larger universal consciousness. So you are healing others just by healing yourself. And that's the beauty of this course, is that it's not just for your own self that you're purifying and creating miracles, but that energy is spreading to others, and they don't need to know what you're doing for it to have an impact globally. And that's exciting, because if enough of us are working on being miracle workers, there can be such change in this time of great strife and darkness. So that gives me hope. Miracles are a kind of exchange. Like all expressions of love, which are always miraculous in the true sense, the exchange reverses the physical laws. They bring more love both to the giver and the receiver, right? So that the old way of thinking is like, if I give something, then I'm losing something, and that other person is getting something. This is about a mutual exchange, that by my giving to you, you're giving to me. By you giving to me, I'm giving to you. So it's very circular and reciprocal. And I think that we've all experienced like how great it feels to give to others, like without expecting anything in return. And by having that experience, we get the gift. So in that way, miracles are an exchange of energy. And the use of miracles as spectacles to induce belief is a misunderstanding of their purpose. So this is not about expecting, parting the Red Sea like that. We don't have to do that to say, see, this is a miracle, I'm proving this is a miracle, because to do it just for show, right, or to be dramatic defeats the entire purpose. That's what we're kind of getting at there. Prayer is the medium of miracles. It is a means of communication of the created with the creator. Through prayer, love is received, and through miracles, love is expressed. Okay, so through prayer, love is received, and through miracles, love is expressed. So love is the expression of a miracle, and by praying, we allow ourselves to receive. And in our culture, I think there's still a lot of shyness that people have about sharing that they pray, or that they even have any kind of spiritual practice. But it's interesting to me, the more that I've gotten into this practice myself, it's like it almost comes out. I hear other people talking about, you're nodding your head, you have the same, where people start sharing with you like their prayer experiences, or I'll be like in a medical setting where you're not expecting people necessarily to be tuned into prayer, and the nurse is talking about prayer, or I haven't really had doctors talk to me about prayer, but some of the people in that atmosphere. So it's like when you become open about your practice and your energy emanates that, it kind of brings more of that to you, which is beautiful. And a lot of people don't know how to pray. They think that there's like a right and wrong way to pray, especially if they've not been someone who's prayed a lot in their life, or maybe they associate prayer with, I know in my upbringing, prayer was you have a prayer book and you sit there and you repeat the words that are written when they tell you to say that, and then you repeat it again when they tell you to say that, and you stand and you sit and you stand and you sit. And I never liked it because I didn't like people putting words in my mouth, and I just felt like a robot. But I did it, and I respect the tradition and all that stuff, but that to me, I never felt any connection to God or to any higher power in that kind of scenario. And some people do. But for me, I just was like, prayer is useless and meaningless because it's just words that are written in a book that are not, I'm just repeating them. So that was, for me, a very difficult thing, and I was turned off to prayer for a long time, or I associated prayer with like being a child and praying that like I got the roll of Claire in the Nutcracker, or like, you know, something like that. And then if it doesn't happen, you're like, see, there is no God, because like prayer in our culture is kind of, you say a prayer to get a specific outcome. And this is one of the things we talked about last week, with how if we pray for a specific miracle, that's misguided because we're trying to control the outcome, and that doesn't allow God to do his work, or our higher power, or the universe, however you want to discuss it or describe it. But it's like putting our agenda and our control on that experience. So that is not prayer. And that's a really hard thing, because we might know, like, we want a very specific outcome, right? Like if your child is sick, it's hard to get your head around the idea of praying like, God, do what is in the highest good of all, while you're convinced like the highest good of all is that my child get better, not that something else happen, right? So it's like, okay, how do we pray in that way? And this is something to kind of just practice on your own and see how it goes. But I know whenever I've prayed for a very, very specific outcome, it doesn't turn out that way, and you like close yourself to all the other amazing possibilities that could step in if you didn't have your eyes set on like one specific outcome. And if people are interested in it, we can talk more in later weeks about building a personal prayer practice that works for you. A lot of people like to set up a special like place in their home where they do their prayer and meditation to kind of sanctify it in a way and make it a place where you can connect peacefully with your higher self. Some people like to build an altar and put crystals, but it doesn't have to be that formal. It could just be like this corner of the couch right here at this time when no one's there is my special spot. It can be as simple as that. I'm curious, do any of you have a regular prayer practice? You can just raise your hand. Okay.
I have to.
Yeah.
Start the day.
Every day?
We gotta wake up before she does.
Right. It's so true, right? It's a way to set your barometer for the day. Otherwise, the world will set it for you, right?
And at night.
At night, too.
Thank you for guiding.
Awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah. Great. We don't have to do the beginner's lesson then. We're good. We're good. Miracles are thoughts. Thoughts can represent the lower or bodily level of experience or the higher or spiritual level of experience. One makes the physical and the other creates the spiritual. And the Course gets into a lot of discussion about the role of the body in our physical experience versus our spiritual experience later on. But one of my favorite lessons is I am not a body, I am free. And we might do like a full week on that because there's so much in there in that lesson. But we are so identified with our physical experience and how much time, energy, angst we devote to our physical experience, whether it's our appearance, whether it's health issues, whether it's just navigating this world. It's a very physical experience. So like, what do you mean I'm not a body? I'm free. I mean, I am a body. What are you talking about? But you're really not. Like when you're in that meditative place, right? You start to lose awareness of your body. and you go to some other place, and that in the thought system of the Course is really your true essence, your spiritual essence. And the more that you can connect with that spiritual essence, the less impact all of these physical bodily things have on you, because all of a sudden your perception is different. Like, something can happen to you, and you would have had, if you didn't understand or weren't in touch with your spiritual being, you would have a very different experience of that than if you have access to your higher self. And so it's not like you don't care about your physical health anymore or take care of your physical health, but all of a sudden, like, that doesn't define who you are. You can be happy, and that's like those people that are just miraculous, who have horrible accidents or are born with various things that don't work right in their body, or that something happens, and yet they're like the happiest people that you know, right? Because they, by their experience, have been forced to access that higher spiritual plane. And, I endeavor to do this every day, and it's a challenge, but I think it's even helpful to understand that delineation between our higher self and our lower self, and our physical experience and our spiritual one, and to separate those two a little bit. So number 13, miracles are both beginnings and endings, and so they alter the temporal order. They are always affirmations of rebirth, which seem to go back but really go forward. They undo the past and the present, and thus release the future. This is a deep one. I love this one, and I have a teacher myself that I study with, and I've spent a lot of time asking him about this specific one. What do you mean, like, the past is the present and the future? There is no time? What do you mean there is no time, right? That's crazy, according to thinking of our world. Like, I'm someone my whole life who's been ruled by the clock. Never want to be late anywhere, stressed, preparing, doing all this stuff. What do you mean there's no such thing as time? And that's the beauty of miracles, is they don't depend on time. Anything, like we talked about last week, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. Anything can happen at any moment. And as soon as we're no longer bound to the confines of time, we experience freedom. So they're affirmations, miracles are affirmations of rebirth that seem to go back, but they really go forward, because they're taking us to an entirely new place and a new experience. So you feel reborn, like you felt reborn this week, right? Because it was the undoing of the past, but it's really taking you forward to a whole new place. And so basically you're undoing all the past stuff, but you're projecting yourself into another place which releases your future from all the binds of the past, right? Because you're no longer tied to the shackles of your mind from the past. You are finally liberated to create a new future.
It felt like a deprogrammation, like being programmed.
Uh-huh.
And by doing this, I'm returning to the base.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to building on the base.
Nice. And there's no rush here. Like, you've got all the time in the world.
I know, like I read something about being impatient, and I don't remember it now, but it really felt into it. Like, if you're patient, it brings something else. See, I don't even remember.
So one of the best lines from the Course is, those who are certain of the outcome can afford to wait, and wait without anxiety. And that is one of the best lines from, I keep saying every line is like one of the best lines, but there are so many goodies here, right? Like, if you know the outcome, okay, I can wait another day or another week or another year. If you know what's going to happen, you're not anxious, you're not worried, because you know that everything is going to be all right, right? Like we did with our meditation. So it takes so much of the pressure off. Because all of a sudden it's like you don't have to over-control and micromanage every little step, because you know it's all good. Everything is going to be fine. And that's very liberating. All of a sudden you can breathe and you can start to think differently. So that's a big one. So miracles bear witness to truth. They are convincing because they arise from conviction. Without conviction, they deteriorate into magic, which is mindless and therefore destructive, or rather, the uncreative use of the mind. So miracles arise out of conviction. They arise out of your belief in their possibility. And Wayne Dyer, who passed away recently, one of his best messages was that you need to believe it before you see it. This world operates on the programming of, like, I'll believe it when I see it. But no, it actually, you have to believe it before you see it. It has to be some representation in your own mind before you can see it. And that's what those early lessons are doing, like having you recognize that everything that you see is a projection of your own mind. And what's really cool is that you get to choose once you are aware and you start to purify your mind, you get to choose that projection. It's not choosing you anymore. You're making a choice. And that totally flows into feeling happier and more satisfied with your experience because you get to choose what it is. So, but you have to have that conviction. If you're allowing yourself to be like willy-nilly buffed about by like whatever's happening out there, and this happens to all of us, right? So it's not like we're able to, until you're a true ascended master, you can't really do this like 100% of the time, but starting to build the awareness, and when you notice yourself upset, stressed, anxious, whatever, okay, how can I choose differently right now? Because I need to feel better right now so I can do what I need to do. It's really, really powerful, and so that's where your conviction comes in. Each day should be devoted to miracles. The purpose of time is to enable you to learn how to use time constructively. It is thus a teaching device and a means to an end. Time will cease when it is no longer useful in facilitating learning. So our time here is an opportunity for us to learn. And our time will cease when there is nothing more to be learned. But devoting your day to miracles through prayer, through starting it out with your lesson, that allows you to set yourself up to use the time in the way that accelerates your learning. Because, like I said, there's no rush here. You have all of time to learn these lessons, but you can save time on this level by devoting yourself to the miracles now and kind of reducing suffering. Because a lot of, people have questions like, how much do I need to suffer? And our whole experience is defined by our suffering. And like, when is the suffering going to end? Well, it ends the moment that you decide that it's going to end, because the world will keep throwing stuff at you. And the question is, how long are you going to be the happy recipient of all the crap that the world throws at you versus deciding to choose a different way and choosing a miracle-minded mindset? So miracles are teaching devices for demonstrating it is as blessed to give as to receive. They simultaneously increase the strength of the giver and supply strength to the receiver. So this follows up on that concept about the exchange of energy between the giver and receiver that we were talking about. So when I give, I receive. When you give, you receive. It's reciprocal. And miracles transcend the body. They are sudden shifts into invisibility away from the bodily level. And that's why they heal. So this is a spiritual healing. This is allowing us to shift from our body identification to our spiritual identification. In that way, they are miracles, because all of a sudden we're no longer bound by the confines of our physical experience of space and time and the limitations of our own body. And we have access to so much more. A miracle is a service. It is the maximal service you can render to another. It is a way of loving your neighbor as yourself. You can recognize your own and your neighbor's worth simultaneously. So this is a really important point here, because a lot of times when we have anger at others, we think like they're bad and we're good, that they were wrong and we were right. But whenever part of the message of this course is by having anger and like punishing and seeing flaws in another, we are seeing those very same things in ourselves, because we are actually acknowledging those things as real. And if they have those things, we must have them. We must believe in those and have a belief in those. So our own unforgiveness to others is unforgiveness to ourselves. And that's why, like, I love this meditation today, really, to conquer self-animosity. Because as long as we hate ourselves, we're hating others. We can't be loving toward others and hateful to ourselves. It's an impossibility. Just like we can't be hateful to others and be loving to ourselves truly. It's like either one way or another. Whatever flaws we're willing to see in others, we're willing to see in ourselves. And whatever beauty that we're willing to see in others, we must be willing to see in ourselves that reflects our own light. And so miracles allow you to see your neighbor as you, in good and in bad. If you're angry at them, you're angry at yourself. If you love them and admire them, that's reflecting your own light. And it's really, really powerful to use this in relationships, right? Because we all get so invested, whether it's in romantic relationships, friendships, family. Oh, they were wrong, or she's this, or he's that. Like, we have a million scenarios from every single day that we could come at about how the other person has wronged us, or not been grateful enough, or used us, or been dismissive of us, or ignored us. But as long as we focus on those aspects, we are reflecting that darkness in ourselves. And that's why forgiveness is one of the most powerful and major elements of this learning and unlearning process, because forgiveness is the medium by which we are able to transform our experience. And forgiving someone doesn't necessarily mean we have to be a doormat, and that's a big issue that comes up for people, and we'll spend like a week on forgiveness or a few weeks on forgiveness if people are interested in, because it's like, to forgive someone doesn't mean that you say that their behavior was okay, or that you condone it, or that you are willing to be a victim to it time and again. Part of loving yourself is setting boundaries about what you do and don't allow to happen within your realm of experience. And if you notice that this person has a pattern of harming you and not respecting you, you forgive them, but you don't allow them to do it in the same way again. So forgiveness is a purification process. When we talk about purification of the mind, it purifies you, because everyone quotes, like, was it the Dalai Lama, was it Buddha, who said that anger is like swallowing poison and expecting someone else to die? I've heard so many people attributed to that quote, but it's really powerful, right? Anger is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die. No, it poisons you. Forgiveness allows you to get rid of that poison, to actually release that anger, and to be your light-filled container again. When we hold on to anger, we're holding on to darkness, and we're seeing that separation between them and me. We forgive, and we are able to move on. They don't half the time know or care if we're angry, and they probably don't know or care if we forgive them, but we know, and that dictates our energy and our experience. So that's why, as hard and as challenging as it can be to forgive people, especially when they've done something that we think is unforgivable, we find a way to let go of the anger, because that heals us, not because it helps them. It's hard, and it's constant, and it's repeated, but that's the concept there. Miracles make minds one in God. They depend on cooperation, because the sonship is the sum of all that God created. Miracles therefore reflect the laws of eternity, not of time. Okay. Miracles reawaken the awareness that the spirit, not the body, is the altar of truth. This is the recognition that leads to the healing power of the miracle. And so that's in those situations where we see people and we think, like, how can they be okay? And they are, because they're having that spirit identification regardless of what's happening to them on the physical realm. And it has to take constant recommitment, right? Especially early on. Miracles are natural signs of forgiveness. Through miracles, you accept God's forgiveness by extending it to others. Right? That's what we just talked about. Miracles are associated with fear only because of the belief that darkness can hide. You believe that what your physical eyes cannot see does not exist. This leads to a denial of spiritual sight. And so the purification of the mind is leading you from a purely physical sight to the spiritual sight, and from the belief that everything related to your five senses is what is real, versus seeing in the spiritual way, which is beyond the five senses, and knowing that just because you can't see it does not mean it does not exist. Like, right? We can't see energy without special devices, but it exists and we use it. So that's a great example of that, where our physical senses, our five senses, may not acknowledge something that's truly there, but we feel it, right? We do feel it. Energy. When we say we feel, they have great energy, right? We all know what we're talking about. And we can't see that energy, but we feel it, and it's real. Miracles are associated with fear only because of the belief that darkness can hide. Okay, so we did that. And disassociating from physical sight to spiritual sight. So in this way, miracles rearrange perception and place all levels in true perspective. This is healing because sickness comes from confusing the levels. The levels, this is a pretty complicated concept in the Course. And what we need to understand is that the miracles, when we rearrange our perceptual experience, that's how we're able to experience miracles, is by not getting stuck on that physical plane. Miracles enable you to heal the sick and raise the dead because you made sickness and death yourself, and therefore you can abolish both. Right? So the idea in the Course is that both sickness and death are our projection onto certain experiences. And if we created them, we can uncreate them with the power of our minds. You are a miracle capable of creating in the likeness of your Creator. Everything else is your own nightmare and does not exist. Only the creations of light are real. And I think this is a really good concept to close on today, because it's a very deep one. So basically only the light, only the love are real. Everything else is just a illusion of the mind. The darkness, the fear, it's a nightmare. Like whatever we see, this living nightmare that we see in the outside world that we don't like is a nightmare of our own creation. And that's really like mind-boggling almost to think, like, why would I create my own nightmare? I just want to be happy. I just want peace. I just want everything to be easy. That we go through life thinking that, but yet we create. How many times have we, the facts of the situation are different, but how many times have we all repeated the same scenario in different contexts, time and time and time again? And we continue to try to make something work that's not working. We get stuck in these patterns of our own making. And that's why purification of the mind is necessary, because these patterns keep us in the nightmare. But all that nightmare is not real. So that's the beauty of this, is you can undo it all in 1 second when you make a different choice. And you choose again, and you choose again, and choose again. And you get to start to dictate your experience, like no matter what's happening. Natasha, we were talking about LifeGate last week, and we were talking about how can we choose to see a situation that no one would want to have to deal with, and how can we connect with it on a different level. And we can either choose to feel like a victim, out of control, upset, angry, that whole scenario, or we can choose to see it differently. We can choose to see, wow, I recognize the other person as me. What their experience is also my experience, and how we are all connected. And the only real peace in all of it is love, because that's the one thing that can last. Somehow the lice will go away in some way. Somehow the fear will dissipate. Somehow, and there'll be another scenario. It won't be that lice this next time. It will be chicken pox or measles or SARS or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And there's always something, right? Right? I mean, there's always the world on the physical level, right, is always going to present us with a new challenge. We're never going to be done. So how do we connect with what is real? And that's right. And that's like where our power is. How are we going to navigate this and not let it take us down? Because all of these things can take us down. And they might for a little bit, but we can rise back up. And that's the miracle. So I think that's a really good ending point for today. Any questions or thoughts as we process all this? It's a lot. It's really a lot.
No, but just discussing it is just like, you know, opening little doors in my mind that like
I love that, right?
I considered before, but never really like examined more thoroughly. So just to like hear you discuss it is very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I guess I'll try to articulate this as best as possible. It seems like there's a deeply ingrained, probably culturally, you know, inherited. It's like a subconscious belief that if I relax and I'm really just in the ease, like, you know, the lilies in the valley, that toil nor do they spin, it's like that's when, you know, something's going to happen or the other shoe's going to drop. Or if I'm not on guard, you know, there's a comfort in being on guard, but you don't get to see the glory of the other side of that, which is, you know, to be at ease and peace and one with the present moment. So especially when, you know, driving kids in the car or a human inherited fear of pain in general, you know, like I'm perfectly at ease and fine right now, but when we talk about, you know, the body and body-mind identification, it's like, how do you get over the fear of pain or something might happen? What was it, Tennessee Williams just said, I led this tumultuous life, most of which never happened or something?
Yeah.
So I know that's been my path and my lesson so far in this experience. And I don't need, I mean, it's not really a question, it's just sort of like, I'm just uttering you know, just my truth as it is today, and I think that putting some light on it will, you know, you put the intention out, like I'm ready to learn, like show me, you know, when the student is ready.
Exactly. The teaching,
will appear.
the teachings come, and that's so true. Like that's how fear has us in such a headlock, right? It's because we're waiting for like the other shoe to drop. Like if we have joy, we like, you know, we talked last week that there's just duality. It was 9/11 last week, the anniversary, and we were talking about, you know, free will is always, so there can be darkness because people choose there to be darkness, and things can happen, and that's why it's like, let's hold on to those light-filled experiences, knowing that that's our truth, and knowing that that is our possibility, and knowing that the rest of the stuff will pass because it's not real anyway, and trying to get our comfort in that. But of course, we do live on this plane as well, and so that's where developing your spiritual capacity is going to allow you to navigate those experiences we were not so ready to receive in a different way, right? But I hear you, sister. Yeah. So I'm going to be away the next 2 Fridays, so we'll resume again the first Friday in October. Well, not the first Friday, the second Friday, sorry, because I'm out the second. But I hope that you will keep up with your practice, keep up with your meditation, and we will regroup again in October. And I thank you for just sharing your gifts and your time and being open to a new perception and discussion. It's awesome. So congratulations. We will have some parting music. I love this song. Prayer is our medium for miracles.
Yeah. You need to make a Spotify playlist with all of these songs.
I will.